Hey guys, in this video I'll be talking about how to create such title animation. If this is the first time you're watching my videos, make sure you hit the subscribe button and click on the bell and turn on the notification. Okay, without further ado, let's begin. The first thing that I need is the text. For that, I select the type tool and write the text. I'm using this font, and as you can see, it has sharp corners and the lines are straight, which is suitable for such animation. And if you're planning to use the same font, I put its link in the description. After I'm done creating the text, I like the background so it won't be selected. I select the text and enable this option so I can see the borders of the layer. I set the paragraph to the center and place the anchor point in the center. For that, I use the motion tools. And I hit Ctrl Home so it places in the center of the comp. Then I have to convert the text into a shape and cut it into separate pieces based on the animation. So I convert it to the shape. Then I change its color. To separate the M letter, I duplicate this layer and change its name. In a shape layer, I select all the shapes by pressing Ctrl A, I deselect M, and I delete the rest. I also put its anchor point in the center of it. I want to create an animation like this for M and cut it into 4 pieces. For that, since I don't need the stroke, I delete it. Then I delete the extra points of the shape by holding Alt and dragging. And for the points not to have handles, I select all the points. I hold Alt and left click on one of these points so they won't have handles anymore. After that, I name layer M01 and duplicate it 3 times. For the first part of M, I delete this part. The next layer is for this part of the letter, so I delete the other parts. Well, let's work on the next part. This part should be here, as well as this one. And in the end, I should keep this part. Okay, after that, I place their anchor point in the center. I open their positions. I create a keyframe for them. I go to frame 15 and I create another keyframe. I go back to the beginning of the timeline and move this part up so the path of the animation would be exactly in the middle of the part. I move this one down. This one upper. And also this one down. Then I make the final keyframes easy. I select the keyframes and go to the graph editor. And I decrease the speed of the animation here. So it would look like this. I enter the shape layer. I create a keyframe for its path. I hit U so I can see the keyframes. For the path of the other layers, I create keyframes as well. I go to the end of the animation and create the second keyframes for the paths. In the beginning, I change the paths of the shapes. For that, I pick up the pen tool, then select these points and lower them. I do the same for the other ones too. I select the final keyframes and by the motion tools I set the easing to 80, so the speed of the path's animation and the animation of the position would match. The first layer should be in the beginning. The second layer should start with 1 frame delay. I move these 2 layers 2 frames forward and this one just 1 frame, so the animation would be consecutive. Then I select all the layers and put them in a new comp. Okay, now let's work on the O letter. I duplicate this layer. I name it O. I open the layer. I delete every single shapes except for O. I place its anchor point in the center. Here I don't need to merge paths and strokes, so I delete them. And then I start animating the shape. I open its position. I create a keyframe for it. Then I go to frame 15 and create another one. Then I go back to the beginning and place it upper. In the end, this layer here. So at the beginning, it should be above this ruler. I set the second keyframe to 80. In the layer, I select the inner path, create a keyframe for it. Move it here and I select one of the points and hit Ctrl A. Then hit Ctrl T so the selection tool appears. And I make it smaller so it won't be visible. And then I move it above. Then I set the influence of the second keyframes to 80. Then I move the animation of the path here. It's better I make this one easy. Initially O comes down and then the animation of the inner path starts. Maybe a little bit this way. Okay, looks great. And to make it show up like this and not visible at first, I duplicate this layer. I hit U key, I delete its keyframe, I enter the layer, and I delete the inner path, so it would look like this. And I scale it up a bit. I set it to 102. And I name it matte. And I choose it as a matte layer for the O. Now as you can see the layer isn't visible at first, then it shows up like this. I think the animation of the second path starts a bit too soon. It looks good. Okay, after that I select these 2 layers and put them in a new comp. The animation of the I and N are similar to M, so you can use the same method to animate those letters. And the second O is the same as the first one. Just the animation path is different. However, the animation of the G is a bit complex, so I start doing that. Like before, I place G in a separate layer. Then I delete the extra points. And it must be cut into 3 pieces. For that, I name this G01, and I duplicate it twice. The first part of G is this line. So here I create a point and delete the rest. And I make this linear. The second part is this line, so I delete the rest. And for the last part, I select one point, hit Ctrl A so all of the points would be selected. And by holding Alt Shift and dragging, I deselect these points, and then I delete the rest. I select the layers and place their anchor point in the center, and then I start animating the parts. For animating these 2 parts, I can do the same as I did for M. And to animate this part, I have to create a path. So for that, I pick up the pen tool and create a path in the center of it. I solo these 2. I disable the fill. I hold Alt and edit this part of the path. I increase the width so it would cover the shape completely. I name it Matte. In the matte layer, I add a trim path modifier to the contents. In the beginning, I set the N to 0, and in frame 15, I set it to 100, so the animation would look like this. After that, I choose it as a matte layer for the first part of G. Now, if you look, the first part of G shows up like this. And for the animation not to be so fast, I increase its length. Once this layer is done, this one appears. Well, I have to animate the paths of these parts as well. Okay, after that, I select all of them and put them in a new comp. Let's go to the letter U. You should also animate like this part of G, however with a little difference, which I'll get to it. I select all the shapes, then deselect U and delete the rest. I deselect every layer and start creating the path. I name it Matte. I add a trim path to it. I want the animation to start from here, so I set its end to 0 in the beginning. And in the end, I set it to 100. I select the U layer and choose the matte layer from here. Let me make the second keyframes easy ease. Let's see. For the animation to look better, I lower these points. And for the animation to start a bit upper like this, I duplicate the matte layer. I name it Start. I make it visible. I move this point up a little like this. I decrease its stroke and I align it to U. Then I create a point here and then delete the rest of the points. Then I change its color. And then I have to match the animation of it to the main U. I open the layer, I create a keyframe for the start of the trim path. And in the end, I set it to 100. And make it easy ease too. I move it right here. I can make the animation slower. It looks better. After that, I select the layers and put them in a new comp. This part of R animates just like M. And this part, as you can see, is masked and appears from the left. And the third part is just like the first part. And the animation of the second U is the same as the first one. However, it's flipped and it's a bit delayed. Okay, after I've done this, to create a layer, the animation like here, first I rename the M comp. I duplicate it twice. I move these two forward. The first layer that shows up has a different texture. To make it look like that, I created such a texture which you can download from the description below. So I move this texture above the first layer, and I choose the texture as a matte layer. After 4 frames, the second comp appears. I change the color of the second comp. I add a fill effect to it and I change its color to white. And after 3 frames, the third comp shows up. And the color is black. Let's check it out. And if you wanted to increase the width of the letter, you can go to the letter comp and add a stroke to the layers. And change its color. I copy the stroke and paste it for the other 3 layers too. If you ever wanted to make it thicker, you can increase the stroke from here. As you can see, M is thicker than O. After that, I select the M layers and change their label color so they would be obvious. The same thing that I did with the letter M, you can do it with other letters too and complete the animation. Okay, the next thing that I need to do is create such lines. As you can see, as the letters are being formed, some lines move along them. To create such lines, I can use the text shape. I convert it to shape again. I delete the extra points. The first part of M goes down, so I want the line to go up. So I disable the fill and enable the stroke. And the animation of the last part goes up, so I want the lines to go down and stop here. So I duplicate this shape. I disable the second shape for now. For the first shape, I want the line to move from below. I make it linear. I want it to move from below, come here and stop. So I don't need these parts. I select these 2 points and from the mask and shape path, I uncheck the close option, so the shape would be open. And then I delete these points. And I edit the lines so they would be tangent to the letter. After that, I need to work on the second stroke, which has to come from above. Again, I select these 2 points and open the path. I don't need these points, so I delete them. I select all the points and make them linear. Then I align the points. After that, I select the first stroke and add the trim path to it. I delete the fill of the trim path. I set the start to 100. I create keyframes for the end and start. In the beginning, I place it here. Until here, the stroke should look like this. I think it looks good. Let me disable this so I can see the stroke better. I make the second keyframes easy. For the stroke not to be short in the beginning, I go 4 frames forward and increase the start. It looks good. After I've done this, I copy the trim path and paste it on the second stroke. Where the animation of the last part starts, I put the keyframes here. And here I set the merge path like this. and I rename the layer. Well, the next thing that I need to do is create a hand-drawn style for it like this, which I had done in the previous videos. And in order not to make this video too long, I will not repeat it again. And if you want to create such an effect, definitely watch this video. To make things easier, I copied these effects from this project and paste them right here. As you can see, a hand-drawn effect is made. And to copy and paste these effects, I select them. In the edit menu, I hit copy with property links. Then I select the intended comps and hit Ctrl V. By doing this, once I make any changes to the main effects which are applied to this comp, the other effects will change along as well. And I won't need to change effects individually. Let's check it out. I copied the stroke effects that I made from this project and paste them for the stroke here, so it would have that hand-drawn effect. And for the animation to have a stop motion effect, I add posterized time effect to an adjustment layer. And I set its frame rate to 6, so in every second it would show us only 6 frames. Well, you can continue doing this and animate every single letter. And as I said earlier, to learn how you can create hand-drawn effects, stop motion effects, and create such backgrounds, make sure to check out this video I've posted before. And if you want to learn the entire process of creating this title animation and download the project files, you can check out the links in the description below. Thanks to everyone who was with me until the end of this video.